Welcome to the Fogwood Files, where fog lingers among the trees and the forest holds its secrets close. The Canadian Maritimes are a land of silence and shadow, where paths dissolve into mist and voices echo without a source. Here, beneath the canopy of pines, people have witnessed things they cannot explain. Their words remain as fragments of a larger mystery, stories carried through the woods like whispers in the dark. Tonight, we open one of those accounts and step deeper into the ledger of the strange.
Case File 014, The Lantern Wraith. Date of encounter, September 1991. Location, Welsh Pool, Campobello Island, NB. Date of report, September 1993.
I've written plenty of notes in my time. Catch records, weather logs, repair lists, but none like this. This isn't for the fisheries or the co-op this time. This is just for me. This is a record of something I cannot explain with nets or tides or weather. Perhaps it is a warning, perhaps just a memory. Either way, it needs to be written down. I figure a man ought to make sense of his own life before someone else tries. They call me Frim. Always have. Ephraim Calder, if you want to get proper, though no one said it that way in a long while, except Mavis when she's calling me for supper. I've been a fisherman on Campobello Island since before most of the boys on the wharf were born. Most of the fellows I'd fished with are long gone now. 90 years on this planet, and I've no plans to leave it yet. Campobello's in my bones, same as the salt in the tide. I was raised with salt in my hands before I ever held a pencil. My father took me out in his dory when I was no taller than the gunwale. I mended nets and hauled traps before I could even lift a lobster pot properly. "Steady now, Frim," he'd say, hand on the tiller. "Don't let her dance on the tide like a fool." I built my own dory. I rowed her myself, set my traps by hand, and hauled them in the same way my father did. The sea has been my church, my confidant, and my home. I still take the dory out when the weather's fair, just to feel the sea under me, hand line in hand. Gulls circle, weirs creak, tide hums. I speak little, don't need to. The sea teaches me more than talk. Watch, wait, row steady. That's how it's always been. That's how it always will be. Things have changed something fierce since I started fishing these waters. When I was a lad, it was herring weirs and hand lines. The sea was alive then, slapping the dory and shining with scales. Then came the big boats, the factories. They took the fish and left the water quieter than it ought to be. Still, I kept at it. Old habits die slower than men do. Now the harbor is full of steel boats with motors, hydraulic winches, and blinking lights. The new boats hum with motors and gleam with radar. The young fellas say it's progress. Maybe it is, but I miss the quiet. I miss the sway of the tide against wood, the creak of the oars, the low whisper of wind through rigging. I miss when the sea spoke soft enough that you could still hear yourself think. House sits up on Welsh Pool Hill, white with green trim, roof to match. You can see clear across the bay to Lubeck when it's not a thick old fog. The lights wink like someone's left the stars burning too low. Outside there's a garage where I built every boat I ever rowed. Sometimes I had to tear the front clean off to get one out. Doesn't matter. Boats take space. Always have. Mavis used to scold me for that, shaking her head but smiling at the same time. Mavis sits by the front window every morning, shawl over her shoulders, knitting or crocheting. She says she can see me better from that chair now than she ever could when she was young and chasing after me down to the wharf. Her hips aren't what they were since the surgery, but she never complains much. Just hums a little when the fog rolls in thick, soft as the gulls settling on the tide. From that window she can watch me when I take the dory out. Lantern swinging, gulls crying overhead, tide running cold as glass. She'll call out, "Be back by supper, Ephraim." She's the only one left who says it that way. Only her voice fits it right, and I always am. The kitchen still smells of salt fish and biscuits when I come in, just as it did 50 years ago. Steam fogging the panes while she clucks about the mess on my boots. Our daughter's over on the mainland now, nurse in St. Stephen. Been there near 30 years. Raised 5 kids, now they've gone and filled the world with more of their own. The house feels bigger since they stopped coming for summers. Used to be full of noise, boots on the porch, gull feathers in their pockets. Mavis chasing them off her clean floors. The oldest boy took to the sea same as I did. Couldn't keep him off the wharf when he was small. Knew the feel of a hand line before he could tie his own laces. Always wanted to do things right. Sat beside me gutting fish, face wrinkled in concentration. "You feel the weight," I told him. "Fish will tell you what it is if you listen." He nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. I see a bit of myself in him, same eyes for the water, same stubborn streak. She keeps after us to come over. She says it'd be easier if we were closer. Doctors, groceries, all that. "No sense you two staying out there by yourselves," she tells me. "You'll be safer on the mainland, Dad." I tell her, soon. "But soon, Frim," she presses. "You'll never know when the seals change faster than you think." I shake my head, smiling. "It'll take more than a tide to shift me from here." I know she means well, but this island's my bones. The seas and the wood of the house and the nails of the dory and the smell of the mudroom where my boots dry by the door. I was born to this wind, to these tides. The mainland's fine for visiting, but it don't sound too right. Too still somehow. No gulls calling, no foghorns rolling through the morning. Just cars and people in a hurry to be somewhere else. The thought of leaving the island feels like setting a net adrift. Once it's gone from your hands, you never get it back quite the same. Campobello's always had its stories. Lanterns drifting where no boats ought to be, voices carrying through the fog like someone calling you home when no one's there. I'd spent most of my life shrugging off that talk, saying it was just light bending strange or old-timers spooking themselves. But out here, the line between truth and superstition is thin as mist, and some nights you feel the island remembering things you'd rather forget. That September evening, the fog settled low and heavy, wrapping the bay in silence. I knew every sound on that shore, every creak of the weirs and groan of the oarlocks, but there was something else in it. Something that didn't belong. A flicker out past my lantern, moving steady like someone walking a light along the tide's edge. Could have been a trick of the water, I told myself. Yet, as I rowed on, handline in hand, a voice, more feeling than sound, seemed to carry through the fog. "What are you?" I muttered aloud, but no answer came. That was the first night I knew the tide had shifted, and I knew something had come back to the bay. The next night came in colder. Fog thick enough to bead on your eyebrows and settle on your shoulders like damp wool. I took the dory out anyway. Habit pulls a man stronger than fear ever could. The oars creaked in their locks, steady as an old heartbeat, and the lantern on my bow swung slow, carving a small, warm circle in all that gray. Deep out past the cove, the tide was running slack. That quiet spell where sound carries further than it ought to. I just dropped the handline when it hit me. That prickling up the back of the neck, same as when a gale turns before you can smell it. The gulls went quiet all at once. Even the weir poles stopped their groaning, like the whole bay had paused to listen. Then I saw it again. A lantern light. Small, pale, unsteady, moving low across the water, too far from shore for any man to walk. No boat beneath it, and no figure behind it. Just a glow, drifting slow as a funeral march. I watched it rise and dip with the swell, never brightening, never dimming, just watching me back. That's how it felt anyhow. I angled the dory towards home, slow and steady, but the light followed. Not fast, never fast, but sure. Like it knew the cut of my wake. My own lantern guttered, though there wasn't wind enough to stir a thread of fog, and my hands went cold on the oars. A man my age shouldn't scare easily. Sea knocks the fear out of you early. But she also teaches you this. When the water goes quiet and the birds hold their tongues, pay heed. The light slowed as I neared the point, hovering there, trembling faint, like it wanted to speak but had no voice left. Then it vanished. Not drifted off, not swallowed by fog. Snuffed out clean, like someone pinched a wick. The gulls screamed a breath later, as if waiting for permission. I rode home steady, eyes fixed on the faint glow of Mavis' lamp in the kitchen window. Didn't tell her what I saw. No sense troubling her, but when I came up the path, boots squelching on wet turf, she looked at me sharp, like she'd felt something too. "Ephraim," she said, voice thin but certain. "You come in quick now." And I didn't ask why. The next night, the fog thickened to the kind that swallows sound whole, the kind you feel on your skin before you see it. My lantern swung off the bow, barely carving enough light to find my boots. That's when I saw it, again, out past that last finger of rocks. Not bobbing like a buoy, not drifting like any boat light. No, this one walked, moved shore to shore like someone carrying it high, same as the old fellows used to when searching for a man overdue from the weirs. Yellowish flame with a long tail to it, stretched like thin taffy. I let the oars rest, even the sea seemed to hold its breath. The light came closer. Not fast, not slow, just purposeful. And it didn't sway like the swell didn't flicker. Didn't break the way a lantern ought to when water's moving under you. It stayed upright like it was tied to a spine. Something pulled in my gut then, old instinct, warning. "Not tonight," I muttered. "Go on home, whoever you be." The glow didn't turn. Instead, it brightened. Came near enough that I could see the shape around it, or the lack of one. No man, no boat, just a long smear of a shadow, tall as a mast. The lantern hanging where a hand ought to be. And the fog behind it twisted, curling back on itself like it was being drawn into the thing. The sea went still, gulls hushed. And under the quiet I heard a soft sound, rope sliding over wood. Familiar, but wrong. My fingers tightened around the hand line. I knew the stories. Lights that come from men too stubborn to leave the water. Spirits taken by the tide, wandering back for company. Lantern raised to pull you just off course, just far enough that the tide can claim you. I never believed any of it, but when that glow reached the edge of my own lantern's shine, a cold slid over my shoulder, like a wet hand laid there gentle as frost. Frim. Not loud, not clear, more the idea of a voice than a voice itself, right behind my ear. In 90 years, I'd never felt fear like that, because right then I knew. This thing knew my name. I dipped the oar slow and quiet, no splash, no breath wasted, just eased the dory backward, keeping my lantern between us. The Wraith light tilted, like it was watching me go. Then, snuffed out, clean as a blink. Fog rolled in to fill the space where it had stood, thick and full of nothing. But the cold stayed on my shoulder, and the whisper followed me all the way home. That's when I knew it wasn't done with me yet. Didn't sleep much the night after. Never do when something follows me off the water. My lantern hung by the mudroom door, still damp with fog, wick burned low. I sat at the kitchen table with my tea cooling in my hands, listening to the house breathe around me. Mavis slept down the hall, soft as tide water on sand. I didn't tell her a word. Would have only made her worry. But I kept seeing it. That shape in the fog, holding its light just so, like it was waiting for me to notice something I'd missed all my life. By morning, I knew what it was. Lantern Wraith. I'd heard that word only once as a boy, back when Dad was younger than I am now. Fog thick as cream that evening, and he came stomping into the house, boots dripping, jaw set tight. He didn't say much, but he sat by the stove and lit his pipe without striking a match, just held it near the flame, eyes far off. "Frim," he said finally, voice low, "you mind something. There's lights on this island that ain't meant for following. If you ever see one walking where no man should walk, don't answer it. Don't even look too long. That's a Wraith's light. It takes what's tired, it takes what's old, it takes what's forgetting where the world ends." I asked him how he knew. He didn't answer. Men didn't in those days. My grandfather used to say the same, called them fetches, spirits that came looking for men whose time was running thin. Family talk, old talk, the kind spoken in the shed while mending nets, not in front of women folk or children. But I'd listened from the stairwell enough times to learn the shapes of their warnings. I didn't mean to go back out the next night. Truly didn't. My hands ached from the cold, and something in my bones warned me to keep to shore. But habit's a strong thing in an old man, and the sea's pull is stronger still. I've rode these waters near every day of my life. Hard to let fear rewrite it. Fog lay low again, thick enough to hush the world. Even the shore sounded far away. I stood a spell by the dory before untying her, lantern humming soft at my hip. My boots felt heavy, like they knew better than I did. I kept close to the shore this time, just past the kelp beds. Enough water under me to work a hand line, but not so far I'd lose sight of the spruce tops. Gulls wheeled overhead, restless but not screaming. The tide slapped the hull, gentle as a lullaby. For a while, nothing stirred. Then, the quiet came. Not the kind that's peaceful, the other kind, the kind that lands over everything like a lid. Gulls tucked their wings and vanished. Even the tide seemed to hold its breath. I didn't turn around at first. I could feel it before I saw it. Light. Low, pale, wrong. I slid through the fog behind me without sound, just a thin glow stretching long across the water. Not bobbing like a lantern, gliding, almost like it was skimming above the surface. My heart kicked once, like an oar hitting a rock. Dad's words came back to me whole, as if he were sitting in the boat beside me, pipe smoke curling over the tide. "If it knows your name," he'd say, "then the sea's got business with you." I kept my eyes on my hands, moving slow and steady as if I hadn't noticed. Fish guts and seawater clung to my knuckles. My own lantern flickered once, a soft gutter, same as before. That's when I heard the whisper again. Soft, close. Frim. Not calling, not warning, just knowing. I turned. The Wraith was nearer this time, close enough that the shape around the light was clearer, or maybe just darker. Tall, thin shadow stretched longer than any man has right to be. Fog curled into it, feeding like breath into lungs. The lantern it carried, if you could call it carrying, hung at the height of a man's chest, yellowish, steady with that long tail to it, same as a fire pulled thin. No flame, not truly, just light pretending to be flame. It drifted closer. The tide pulled toward it. Not much, but I felt it tug the dory, the way a current nudges you when the tide's turning fast. My hand went to the oar without me thinking, old instinct kicking in like a muscle memory from younger years. The Wraith paused, lantern lifting a hair's breadth, like it was looking, like it expected me to answer. The Wraith didn't rush, didn't need to. It acted like it had all the time in the world to claim an old man who'd stayed too long on the tides. But I'm an island man. I know when the sea wants something that's not hers to take. "No," I said, steady as I could. My voice sounded small, swallowed by fog. "Not this night." The glow hovered, tilted, the whisper thinned to a long breath sliding through my ribs like cold seawater poured straight inside. Then the light brightened, fast enough that I raised a hand to shield my eyes, and in that flash, I saw something inside the glow. Not a face, not hands, just outlines. The shape of something that had once been a person, bent and blurred by tide and time, lost. My stomach dropped clean out of me. I dug the oars deep. I didn't splash, didn't look back, just pulled hard, muscles remembering what the years tried to take from them. The Wraith didn't chase, didn't fade either, just stood there on the water. If stood was even the word for it. Lantern raised, like it was lifting a signal meant only for me. Only when my bow kissed the grid of the shoreline did the light finally dim. Not vanish, dim. Like it was waiting for me to turn around. I didn't. I tied the dory off with hands that shook more than I'd like to admit, walked up the path slow, fog clung to me, colder than it should have. And all the while behind me on the water, that faint glow lingered, hovering just above the tide line, watching, waiting, like it knew I'd be back, because men like me, we always go back to sea. That's when the truth hit me hard enough to still my hands on the oars. It had been looking for me. A lantern wraith doesn't wander. It chooses. And this one had chosen me. Next night came in raw and restless, wind in the spruces talking low like it had something on its mind. I should have stayed ashore. Lord knows I ain't got many nights of fishing left in me anyway. But habit's a hard thing to break at 90, and the sea was all I had that still made sense. So I lit my lantern, pushed the dory off the stones, and let the tide carry me out. Didn't even get past the point before I felt it. A wrongness, deep as undertow. Not fear, something older. Like the world was leaning in to listen. Fog thickened fast, curling around the gunwales like fingers. Sounds dropped away, same as someone shutting a door. No gulls, no weirs creaking. Even the oars went quiet, dipping in without a splash. Then, the smell hit me. Cold. Too cold. Like winter air pulled up from the bottom and threaded through it, faint as memory. Burned wick. Old oil. Lantern oil, but wrong. Sweet in the nose like rot. I knew then it was out there. And it weren't circling this time. It was coming straight for me. The first glow blinked on, far off near the shoals. Same pale shine as before, but this time there were others. 3, maybe 4. Winking into being across the fog like stars punching through thin cloud. Each one steady, each one too high, too still to be carried by any wave. And then they moved together. Slow, sure, purposeful. I gripped the handline without meaning to. My father's voice came back to me, sharp as salt. If ever you see more than one light moving with the same tide, but not the same sea, row for home, boy. Row like the devil's on your stern. I looked down at my hands, old, cracked, knotted, and for a breath I weren't sure they could do what they needed doing. The lantern wraiths kept coming, closing the distance, not in haste, but in certainty, like they'd already decided where I belong. One drifted close enough that I could see inside the glow. A shape like a man, but hollowed. No face, just a long, dark column of shadow. Lantern hanging off it like a heart set to flame. That flame pulled at the fog, bent it inward, fed on it. That's when the nearest one lifted its lantern higher, and I swear on the graves of every calder before me, I saw water dripping off it. Salt water, falling from a flame that should have burned it off. Frim. It came again, soft, almost gentle, but it weren't any voice I'd known. It rattled inside the skull more than it did the ear. I backed the oars, slow at first, then harder. Muscles burned, old bones barking their protests. Didn't matter. I rode like a man 30 years younger. The lantern wraiths answered. Their lights brightened, flared white through the fog. The closest one slid across the water with no wake, no drip, no sound, just straight on, like the sea was hard as ice under it. Then it dipped its lantern toward me. Invitation. Or warning? I couldn't tell. Not tonight, I said, though my voice came out thin. I got my own tide to keep. The wraith paused, lantern tilted, considering. Fog breathed in and out through its shadowy body like dying bellows. Then, water beside my dory heaved, cold as death. A long black shape rising beneath the hull, turning the boat just enough that I lost the starboard oar from its lock. The wraith lanterns blazed all at once. For a heartbeat, I saw them clear. Faces forming in the shadow. Mouths open like drowning men reaching for breath. My father had a name for that. The calling tide. Said it came for men who stayed on the water after it was their time. He said it didn't take them by force, just offered a light to follow. One lantern floated so near, I felt its cold heat on my cheek. A pull in my chest tightened sharp, like a hook set deep. The water below the dory hummed, rising again, rocking me towards the glow. "Get back," I rasped, shoving at the air like it might matter. "I ain't yours." The Wraith lifted its lantern higher, fire stretching long, flame bending towards me like it wanted my breath for fuel. The hook in my chest yanked. I felt myself lean forward, old body moving without permission, following that terrible light. Then, something cracked. Loud, sharp, real. The aft thwart split under my knee, old wood finally giving after 60 years. The noise snapped the world open. My head cleared. The pull loosened. And I did the only thing left worth doing. I plunged my hand into the bait bucket, grabbed the saltiest, rankest hunk of fish left, and hurled it straight at the lantern wraith's glow. The light reeled back, flickering like a flame struck by wind. The others dimmed, shutters closing on some unseen breath. Fog buckled inward. The sea groaned, long and low, like the very bay didn't care for any of this. I shoved off with the remaining oar, rowing crooked, half blind, but with every ounce left in my bones. The wraiths followed, lanterns guttering, but not giving up. Only when I crossed the line of kelp that marks the shallow bar did the lights falter, dimmed, and vanished. Snuffed quick, same as a candle pinched between wet fingers. The fog collapsed behind me, like a dying lung. I drifted the last stretch home, shaking harder than the tide could account for. When my keel scraped the stones below the house, the sky was starting to pale. Mavis's lamp burned faint in the window, steady as it had been for 60 years. I climbed out, boots heavy with more than seawater. I knew one thing sure as sunrise. The lantern wraith had not come by chance, and it hadn't turned back for good. The tide had merely let me go. For now. I didn't sleep much after that night. Not for the next week, or the one after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see it. The lantern hovering, slow and certain, cutting through the fog as if it were marking me or measuring me. It weren't a threat, not really, more a reckoning. Something telling me I'd done enough here, and the tides I'd followed all my life had pulled me to the edge of one thing, and the edge of another. I found myself in the kitchen the next morning, tea cooling in my hands. Mavis sat across from me, her shawl tight around her shoulders. "You look like you've seen the devil himself," she said softly. "I've been through something all right," I admitted, voice rough. "I seen a light. Not any light a man ought to be following." She reached across the table. "Frim, you mean one of those old stories?" I nodded, staring into my cup. "Lantern Wraith. I know what it is now, and I reckon it's telling me it's time." The Lantern Wraith wasn't there to take me. No, it showed me something I already knew but wouldn't admit. It was time to leave the fishing, and the island that had held my life for 90 years. The weirs, the hand lines, the slow hauls of nets, they weren't for me anymore. Not in this new age where the sea itself had changed and the younger folk were gone or gone over to the mainland. The old ways were ending, whether I liked it or not. Mavis didn't need convincing. We packed slowly, quietly, her shawl folded over the back seat, my old boots tucked last into the trunk. I lingered on the porch a moment longer than I ought, looking across the bay at Lubeck, the faint lights winking low under the morning fog. "One last look," I muttered. just one last time. Rowing the dory, hauling nets, building boats in the garage, they'd all been part of me. Leaving felt like shedding a skin I'd worn since boyhood. The children were squirming in the back seat, restless from the ride. Then the youngest of my great-grandchildren exclaimed, "I see the bridge first." I couldn't help but grin. The same words I'd heard from my own grandchildren so many years ago, shouted from the cab of the truck on our way over. A game for the bridge, for claiming the first glimpse of land, or marking the start of something new. When we finally drove across the bridge to Lubeck, I saw it again, just for a moment. The faint lantern hovering low over the water, as sure and patient as the tide. It blinked once, then faded into the gray, leaving the air heavy with memory. I didn't flinch. I understood. It wasn't warning me to run. It was showing me the way forward. I felt the weight lift, slow and quiet, the way the sea eases a boat into calm water. The island would always remember me, and I would remember it. But it was time for a new tide, one that didn't carry nets or weirs or the weights of a man 90 years deep in the water's work. The Wraith had come, and it had left me a choice I could no longer ignore. I was leaving, and I accepted it. Not happy, not eager, but at peace. The island, the sea, the life I'd known, those things were done. And I knew with the last glance back at the fading lantern that the end of that way of life would one day carry me too. But until then, I would meet the next tide as I always had. Steady, quiet, and ready. End of report.
This report submitted by the Fogwood Files. Another account pulled from the fog, preserved in the records. If you'd like the next story to find its way to you, be sure to like and subscribe so you'll be here when the next fire is lit. Until then, stay close to the firelight, because in the woods, you're never truly alone, and something is always waiting just beyond the glow.